Hello everyone, this is Karani here, and I'm here today to share my WoW hotbar setup for controller that I've heard a few people wanted to know a bit more about, and how I put it together, since it's very reminiscent of the main MMO I play, Final Fantasy XIV, with the Cross-Hotbar system they have. So I wanted to go through a quick guide as to how I set that up today. And I've hopefully covered all of the bases that go into making this to be as close to Final Fantasy XIV as possible, so that people who come from that game have a bit easier of a time transitioning into WoW. Now, I want to make two things really quick. One, I would like to thank Squintina. She's a content creator here on YouTube who made a very comprehensive guide to doing very similar a few years back. This is just my updated version of it, since a lot of things have changed since then, so things have become a bit easier, and it's a bit more convenient to make a really nice looking cross-hotbar. Second, this is going to be very janky. WoW was made for mouse and keyboard only, and they added in controller support over time, as opposed to Final Fantasy XIV, which was built primarily for controller and then had mouse and keyboard setup added in. So there's a lot of things that are a one-to-one comparison, but there's a lot of things that aren't. So a lot of this guide will be kind of helping get those two as close together as we can. So let's go through a few prerequisites that you're going to need to make this work. It's mostly just plugins. Or add-ons. You're going to need ConsolePort, you'll need Masque, and you'll need ElvUI. ElvUI is what I use to make all of these icons and hotbars look how they do, as well as being able to adjust things a little bit more compared to Blizzard's default HUD editing interface. So use your plug or add-in software of your choice. I use WoW just because I think Overwolf is a little invasive for my liking, and we will get started. So once you have those three add-ons downloaded, we're also going to be using Steam for this. We're going to be adding WoW as a non-Steam game to Steam, so we can use some of their controller support. This is going to be very important when we get to stuff like being able to double tap to be able to use your expanded cross-hotbar. So make sure that you have that as well. And what I will do is I'll put it up on screen and I'll put it in the description. There is a very useful guide on how to add WoW as a non-Steam game by Konya over on the forums. I'm not going to show it just because a lot of my files are kind of in spaces that may have personal information. But I would give this a read. I'll put it in the description. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that WoW is added as a non-Steam game in Steam. Because then what we can do is we can make a desktop shortcut to open WoW with Steam. That way you don't have to go into Steam itself and then open it that way. But what we're going to do is we're going to get into what Steam actually allows us to do as controller players, as compared to just the basic WoW support that they've added in. So what we can do is we can actually use Shift and Tab on our keyboards to go into the Steam controller layout. What you do is you just go over here to controller settings, and what I've gone ahead and done is I have specifically added my controller layout as a community layout, so you should be able to search it. However, if you can't, I'm going to go into what I've done right now, just to kind of explain how I've made things work. So, the big thing that really differentiates between WoW and Final Fantasy XIV is how they handle specifically trigger inputs. So, Final Fantasy XIV handles trigger inputs as when you press down on the trigger, it registers that as an input. So you press down your trigger twice, it does the double tap. WoW does it kind of in the opposite, where when you release the trigger, is when the double tap will take effect, which makes things a little bit awkward. So the way that I get around this is I go into my Steam settings, and Steam does have double tapping functionality. So what I do is you can go in here and click this gear icon and add extra commands and add in the like criteria for when those commands activate. And so what I did was I added a double press like activation trigger, I guess. And I did it so that it triggers both right bumper and right trigger. So when I double press my right trigger, you know, really quickly, like we would in Final Fantasy, it'll hit bumper and trigger at the same time. And what that does is it counts as a separate input that I can use for a hotbar when we get further into that. Also, I have the normal, I just hold down my right trigger, it counts as a right trigger. I've done the same for left trigger, and that's kind of the big basis for how we're going to make our expanded hotbar work. So going back to the game, that is basically my Steam setup. The community layout should be available. If not, I would go in and change that. I know when I first did it, it was a little bit janky, to where I had to go in, like, add the command, exit out of it, come back in, and then it would be there. It wouldn't just update on its own. So if you're encountering any issues with doing this manually, that's one thing that I encountered. But once we're inside, let's take a look at actually mapping out our buttons. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the ConsolePort plugin, or add-in, sorry. Add-on. I'm from Final Fantasy XIV. Our similar things are called plugins. So what we can do is we can open up ConsolePort, and I'll just quickly go through everything that I've done here. It's going to walk you through a sort of tutorial setup process when you first open it, but this is just what I have based on what's easy for me. I actually don't have anything on this button. I probably should put something there. I just haven't gotten around to it. My auto runs on left bumper. It's just kind of something I'm used to. Notably, my up and my sheath and unsheath weapons are left stick. Again, I could probably put something more useful there. It's just what I'm more used to from Final Fantasy XIV. So I have my up and my down D-pads being target, previous, and nearest friends. Kind of similar to what we have in 14, where you can, you know, hit up and down on the D-pad to go through your party list. Similar process. Now, I have not really tested this on healing in WoW. I'm primarily a DPS player, though I do heal sometimes on the side. I just haven't gotten around to it at the moment. Similarly, I have my left and right D-pads being target, nearest, and previous enemy. Very similar to how we have in 14. You know, very chill. A thing that I'm going to mention right quick, because we're on targeting, though, is, unlike 14, WoW does not have a situation where you just press A, target something, and then A again to interact with it. As far as I know, now, someone may have figured this out, and I might not know about it. If so, please let me know. I would love to know about that. Your start button is going to toggle the game menu, kind of how Final Fantasy works. Nothing crazy here. Another button where I just put jump here because that's what happens in Final Fantasy XIV. I could put something much more useful here. I just haven't really gotten around to it. So, B. B is a bit awkward because obviously in 14 we use that to deselect things, and WoW doesn't have just a untarget whatever you're currently targeting button along with like exiting out of menus. So I have toggle game menu here. Basically what that does is it's the equivalent of hitting the escape button, which kind of does what we want, except when there's nothing targeted, it's going to open the game menu. That's something you have to get used to, but once you're used to it, it shouldn't be that huge of a deal. Obviously my A is interact with target. It's the same as in Final Fantasy XIV. Now for my X, I do have a utility ring. This is a thing specific to ConsolePort. We've had it in other games. Hoyover's games come to mind with their controller support, where it gives us like a radial ring that we can like assign stuff to, and then there's like sub menus where I can use like my teleports and stuff like that. Right mouse button, I haven't put anything on, and these are like paddles where if you have a controller that has additional buttons on the back. I don't. I used to. I just rock a usual Xbox Elite controller at this point. But yeah, that's the basic setup. But let's get into the important things that will help us make our cross-hotbar. The first thing that we really want to focus on is our modifiers. Basically, what this means is WoW is set up to convert controller inputs to keyboard inputs. So what I do is, for the sake of simplicity, is if I have my modifier shift to left trigger, modifier control to right trigger, alt is to right bumper, and L and R I think are by default. I haven't really messed with those that much. I don't believe there's anything advanced, anything like that. Now, presets, this does have for like, if you have things by character or by controller. I just have my usual thing, and what I can do is I'm going to actually export my profile for ConsolePort and ElvUI and put it in the comment or the description just for ease of access. I think it's mostly, just plug it in and go. But if not, it at least puts you on the right track if you're not doing this fully manually. So going through things right quick. Interactive target is obviously A, target nearest enemy. This is basically all of the stuff that we've kind of gone through already with a little bit extra. So in Final Fantasy XIV, I do have my, open my inventory with left trigger, right trigger, X. That's kind of what I've done here. Zooming out, I also did what I do in Final Fantasy, right bumper, up and down on the D-pad. In Final Fantasy, obviously, we have it on the joystick, but they don't allow that here, so it's the closest I've got. And the rest you can kind of go through and figure out what works for you. I don't think there's anything too crazy. Obviously I kind of made all this before Housing came out, so I didn't do anything there. Obviously my character pane is the same way I have it in Final Fantasy. Now all of these will not show up on here, on your cross-hotbar. So this is me just doing it by memory because I've done it for 5 years at this point. So it's whatever is easiest for you. Realistically, I should probably put my profession book on something since I do a lot of crafting and gathering in WoW. But yes, a lot of this will be up to your preference. Whatever works for you, whatever you're most familiar with, whatever's most comfortable, do that here. Because in any MMO, I hardcore raid, high-end raid in Final Fantasy, and I kind of always say this to anyone who asks me for advice. The best keybinds are the ones that you are most comfortable with, because that's what you're going to be able to perform the best on. So, that's just my 2 cents. So for action bars, this is where things get really specific. The reason being is we have to do this so these show up on the action bars we're going to make in this very specific way. Because once I show you the layout, you'll understand a bit more. Basically, a lot of these are individual hotbars or action bars that I've kind of Frankenstein together to get this. So I would copy this layout specifically, just to save yourself a bit of a headache, because this took me way too long to organize. So this is what your primary is going to be. All of these are a blank macro that I just put down, because otherwise this is going to be invisible. And I like seeing all my buttons. If you are a type of player who doesn't care if there's nothing there, then obviously leave it blank. It's all good. I would still go ahead and assign the key binding though, just in case. So like these left trigger, right bumper ones are my double taps that we set up in Steam. So when I'm double tapping, you know, double tap my left trigger, hit left on the D-pad, it casts Arcane Intellect. Now, this is a little bit janky, because Steam also does not necessarily pick up the best compared to Final Fantasy, but it's a lot better than WoW's native support. So it's something that you'll get used to with your, you know, how you time hitting your triggers, because you can get very avant-garde with Final Fantasy in comparison. It's much more forgiving on your inputs. These are my extra action bars. Now, what this will cause is, for some of your stuff, if you just use it to put it on screen so you can access it easily, it will show these markings. I have not figured out how to specifically remove those. I'm sure there's a way, I just haven't figured it out yet. So if someone does know, I would appreciate someone saying so in the comments, because that would help me out a lot too. Going through, I'm just going to go through all of this very quickly. I don't recall if there's anything very specific that I have done here. I don't think so. I have left most of this just kind of alone. Reason being is outside of combat, outside of raiding in WoW, I tend to just kind of use my mouse and keyboard just to get around. Just because the game's built for it, it's just a bit easier to, you know, use mouse and keyboard. So, just going through everything right quick. I do have auto loot on. It helps. Targeting things is a little bit awkward, especially if they're dead. So it's something that you just kind of have to get used to. Honestly, it's probably something to do with soft targeting and hard targeting, but I'm not sure. I haven't extensively tested. Largely because I also waited to make this video until midnight was out, because I didn't know what things were going to look like with bugs, with add-ons, with stuff like that, considering there was a lot of talk about things happening to add-ons in the lead up to midnight. So I wasn't sure if things like ElvUI or stuff like that would make it through. But now that it has, you know, here's where we are. This is also my utility ring. Here's my Hearthstone. Here's my Dalaran Hearthstone. Just a mount, one of my flying mounts, teleporting, and then my teleport bar for like the more like important stuff, you know, that I need to teleport to. So yeah, that's the setup. That's most of our key bindings. So the question then is, how do we make all of this look like this? And that's going to be in our two remaining add-ons, ElvUI and Masque. So I'm going to go into the ElvUI interface. Now, looking at this, you know, if it's your first time, this looks really intimidating. It's okay. What I'll do is I will export my profile, and hopefully that will get you set. But there's just a couple of things that we need to specifically address to make this functional. With our action bars, I have basically almost all of them turned on. I don't have some of them turned on because of a thing called paging in WoW. Basically what that means is some of these action bars are actually reserved for things like your druid forms, you know, your cat form, your boomkin, that sort of thing. As well as if you're a rogue and you stealth, you get a different hotbar, you know, that sort of thing. So some of these I have left alone for the sake of making sure I don't mess with anything too much. But if you want to, I think it's something to do with action paging. Now what I have done is with Masque, I have set everything in Masque to control everything. Basically that's just for appearances. I'll go into Masque right quick. And yeah, I've just gone in. I don't recall off the top of my head what skin I use. I use Modern Enhanced. That's what I use. My bad. To make it kind of look like all of this. It's not a perfect one-for-one, but it's pretty close to what we have in Final Fantasy, so it's good enough for me. And next what we do is I'm going to click on the movers button. Basically, this is the edit HUD button. So the big, like, secret sauce for how I make this look how it does is the fact that I have these hotbars, and you'll look over here. I'm probably covering on this one, hold on. I have these hotbars overlapped. So I have hotbar 1 here, hotbar 3 here, and so on and so forth. And one of them's just a, like, single line bar, and the other is, I think, a double or triple? I think it's a double. That I literally overlap under it. Now, specifically, if you are setting this up on your own, make sure your lower number hotbar, your bar 1, your bar 2, your bar 3, is on top. Make sure it is the single line one. This is important because otherwise you will have a bad time putting actions onto this bar. So we're putting this on top because it's smaller than the bigger one, which means we can get around to all of our action bar editing a bit easier. Big thing to think about. Obviously, I have my party frames here. I have my buffs and debuffs here. It's what I have in Final Fantasy. It keeps everything kind of condensed toward the center of the screen where I'm focusing on whatever we're fighting. And I have a bar over here for just quick access things like mounts, hearthstones, that sort of thing. But yes, big thing to remember. Your lower number bars are on top. They are the single line ones. And I'll go into our action bars, double check, and make sure, okay. So what I have for the bigger bars is button spacing 2. My button size is 50. You could go bigger, smaller, whatever you want. 12 buttons, 6 buttons per row. So this is 2 lines of 6 buttons each. My smaller ones are 5 buttons, 12 per row, button spacing of 2, same button size. So the reason that we do that is because, and I will use my time warp for an example. If the bigger bar was on top, I would not be able to hover over anything on this bar. It would cover it up, so it would dominate the space, and that would not work. So that is how I have all of that set up. ElvUI offers a lot of customization opportunities that you can kind of mess with things a bit, so it's just kind of whatever works for you. Last thing is these icons. These are actually custom icons that I made, just because I don't like having these blank spots. So what you can do is you can make custom icons for the game, and basically what it is I just made like a gray square that was of a shade that kind of worked for me. And what you can do is, and I'll pull it up, you can, make that a JPEG, PNG, whatever, find a converter online to convert it specifically to a TGA. That is the file format that WoW uses. And you can go to this place in your install, so go to your World of Warcraft install, retail, interface, icons. Specifically, I put mine as trade_engineering.tga. That is the old engineering icon that's not really used for anything anymore, and I basically just put it in here and it replaced it. Now, if you're in your interface and you don't have an icons folder, you can make one and it'll just do it. Just make sure you have this in here with whatever you want to sub that in for. And I think that is just about everything. We've covered our action bars, how we make them look like this, how we get them assigned. We went over key bindings, we went over Steam integration. I think that's about everything. So yeah, if there's any questions, anything I can help with, I don't know a lot about this. This just kind of was a fever dream that I figured out in about 2 or 3 days. So if you have any advice, any questions, any resources, anything like that, put them in the comments, and I'll do my best to, put anything super useful on blast. But thanks for watching, hope it helped, and have a great day.